Welcome everyone to another Color This with This video. Today I'll be coloring in this book, The Cursed Pirate Girl by Jeremy A. Bastian. I have never seen this book before until I watched a video by another YouTube colorist by the name of Grumblebunny. Her video title was Weird and Wonderful Coloring Book Haul. I love unique books and I'm a big fan of Pirates of the Caribbean movies, so I was definitely interested in getting my hands on this. Illustrations come from Jeremy Bastian's graphic novels. He has a series under the same name, Cursed Pirate Girl. Okay, the images in here remind me a lot of the Ink House. I'm not going to do a full flip through here, I'll just show you a few pages. If you'd like to see a flip through, please head over to Grumblebunny's channel. She does a flip through of this book. But yeah, so as you can see, like I said, it reminds me kind of the Ink House, where you have these kind of more sketchy style illustrations, not, simple line art. You can do some basic coloring in here, but then you get into these types of pages, and there's a lot darker, heavier sketch lines. Just really unique. So, your traditional coloring is not going to work out as well, but you can still do some really cool effects here. So I immediately thought of like a distressed, kind of grungy look for this book. And who does distress better and grunge better than anyone in the craft world? Tim Holtz. So yeah, so I immediately thought of like the distress inks and, the water spraying technique where you get these really kind of grungy looking styles. So yeah, that is what I'm planning on for this book. So now for this page, I'm going to be using some other things. I'm going to demo some of the distress ink stuff, but then I'm also going to be using some other things for her, like Inktense, maybe some other markers and such. So, okay, so the distress products, let's take a look at some of those. I did buy this one. I have several distress inks already. Let me get my little tool set here. So yeah, I do have a few distress inks. These are the two that I'll be working with on this page. This one's called Uncharted Mariner, which is a gorgeous blue color, and then this one's called Vintage Photo. And then to use some of those stamps on the page, I'm sure you've all seen, but you can use these little foam pads. Or the makeup brushes work really nice, more softer blend to those. And then I also picked up a stencil. So this has kind of like this crackled look to it, which I thought maybe not for this page, but there could be some other pages that I can use that on. I've had this stencil before, so kind of like a spotted kind of grungy look. And then I saw this stamp. It is also, again, by Tim Holtz, but it's like a water kind of bubbly looking stamp. So that is something I'm definitely looking forward to trying on here. So yeah, and then you have the distress sprayer, which you can do kind of a fine mist, or if you just squeeze it just a little bit, it creates like bigger drops. So all right, so those are some of the Tim Holtz products that I'll be using in this book. Again, like I said, for this page, I am going to be using those things probably around the edges, and then probably doing Inktense for coloring her. All right, so I normally don't prep my pages with anything like gesso. I decided to use gesso this time just because this paper was a little bit thinner. As you can see, you can kind of already see through it. It's definitely not like Amazon copy paper, but it is a little bit thinner than I would say like a normal cardstock. And I didn't want to take any chances, especially since I was going to be putting a lot of water on stuff. I didn't want it to bleed through. So I did prep my page with gesso, and I have just a short clip on that I will show you. So let's get started. The gesso I'm using is by Liquidtex. It's clear and for acrylic mediums. I'm squirting some around the page and then using a large flat brush to brush it evenly over the page. Trying to do it as evenly as possible. I actually did a practice one on a small piece of paper, let it dry, and then I sanded half of it to make it smooth and left the other half rough. Now I like the feeling of the sanded side better, but the ink actually went on nicer with the non-sanded side. So I'm just going to leave it unsanded. Using the brush too gives it almost like a linen texture, and then it says to let it dry for 24 hours, which is hard for me because I get very impatient. All dry, and I have a piece of paper on the left side just to protect it from the inking. I'm going to start with this Uncharted Mariner ink and use a makeup brush to apply. So I'm just rolling it on the pad to pick up the color, and then I roll it on a scrap paper just to take off the first intensity of color. Starting with a light touch, and then you can add heavier pressure as you go through. Working mostly in the center with this color of the frame, and then I'm going to ignore this frame too, and then bring that color towards the outside edge. To clean the brush, I squirt some water on a towel, and then I really scrub it on the towel until I don't see any color left. This next color is called Vintage Photo, a nice kind of golden brown. This color I will work from the outside edge, moving toward the blue. A little heavier on the edges for that more antiqued look. Now the fun part. I'm using this Distress sprayer to spray fine and some bigger droplets around the page. The longer it sits, the more the water can spread and make some really unique edges around the water spots. Then I can use a towel to dab up the excess, which leaves these really cool looking water spots all over. I've done this before, but they seem to really be dominant right now, and I'm not sure if that's because of the gesso, but yeah, I'm really loving it. All right, now the moment of truth, the backside. There are some spots I see, and that might be my fault because I didn't have enough gesso, but it's not everywhere the water spots are, so it did definitely work. On to my stamp. This is a huge stamp. It measures 5 by 7. It's the biggest stamp I have, so thankfully it came with its own acrylic block. This one is called Bubbles by Tim Holtz. And I only want a part of it coming up on the corners, so I'm going to ink more than I need and just have my scrap paper catch the rest of it off the page. Using the Uncharted ink again, I'm pressing and rubbing it around the rubber image, making sure I'm going a little heavier on the ends where there's a bunch of little details and dots. And I'm just checking to see if I inked enough of the image. All right, so once it's inked, now I'm gonna take my sprayer and I'm gonna spray some mist over the ink. This will move the ink around, creating another kind of messy, watery look. And remember, that water will interact with the previous ink too. Okay, so let's see what happens. All right, I'm gonna carefully place it in the area I want, and I wanna make sure that the right edge of my stamp goes off my page because I don't want that hard edge of the stamp image to be on my paper. Okay, so I'm gonna press firmly and lift up, and ooh, look how pretty that is. Spraying the water gives you those variations of colors in the ink, so it's not just one solid color. It either looks like a wave of water is coming up here, or I just spilled a very festive drink on my page. So I'm not going to re-ink for my second stamp. I'm just gonna use what's on there. And I'm gonna do this upper corner. It won't be as intense, but that's okay. I'm still gonna get those color variations. All right, I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm gonna clean the stamp off now. And to do that, I'm just gonna use a baby wipe and wipe off that ink. Now you could use all distress inks or other stamping ink to color the image. I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to show you how with just a small area on my image. So I'm taking a plastic sheet, but you could use any non-porous material, even like the acrylic block that the stamp came on. And I just pushed it onto the ink pad, and now I can use that as like a watercolor palette. So obviously more water is going to have a lighter effect, and then using less water and more ink is going to be darker. For the rest of the image, I'm going to be using mostly Derwent Inktense and then some other markers and color pencils. I accidentally did not hit record when I did the hat, so I apologize, but I used Matter Brown. For the areas that I'm wanting to be black, like the boots and the hair, I'm going to use Deep Indigo because it's going to give a nice kind of blue highlight effect for the black areas. So I do notice right away how different the pencils go on with the gesso. It's very rough. The color does not act the same as if it were on cardstock either. It doesn't, I don't know if it doesn't move around as much or it doesn't absorb as much, but yeah, it's definitely different. What I didn't realize when I was first coloring this was that you don't need a lot of the pigment, especially in areas you want lighter. So as you can see, as I'm adding water, it looks pretty solid. Where normally with the water, it will lighten up and move around. I just put down too much color and there's not enough space to move it around. So for the hair and some of these other areas that I don't want it quite so dark, I'm gonna scratch the pencil on my plastic sheet and then use it as a paint palette. This will allow me to get some lighter shades of that color. Okay, off camera, I tried to fix the boots by adding more water to the boot area and then trying to dab it up with a paper towel. It worked a little bit, but then I ended up bleeding some of that blue in like around outside of the boot. So didn't really work the way I wanted to. I'm kind of hoping that the blue around her foot just looks like it's part of the little stamp ink area because it's the same color. So anyway, it's not a huge deal, but definitely something I didn't want to have happen. So for her dress, I am using Shiraz, I believe is how you say it. It is kind of this burgundy red color. And then to highlight, I'm going to be using Carmine Pink. And as you can tell, I am not putting it all over this time, just mostly in the shadows. That way the ink has room to move around when I add the water. I want her undergarments to have kind of a grungy, dirty white look, so I'm adding a little bit of this saddle brown for the shadows. I'll also be using willow for the sword and knife handle. So because I used that gesso to create a barrier, I'm able to use some alcohol markers too. So for the next parts, that's what I'll be using. For the skin shadow, I'm going to be using a Tombow marker, and listen to the texture of the paper. And my final step is just to add a little color pencil to highlights and add shadows where needed. I wish I would have done this earlier with the boots. It would have been a lot easier. I do not like the feel of the color pencils on the gesso, so not planning on doing much with the color pencils. All right, all done. Final thoughts. First, the background was really a lot of fun to create. Most of the time, I'm very calculated, or I want a little bit more control of every little aspect on my page. But every once in a while, it's okay to just give up that control and let the art just do its thing. The gesso worked for the most part. I might put on a heavier layer or 2 layers next time because there was some bleed through, but not too bad. It really helped, I think, the inking in that water like distress layer, but I did not like it for the color pencils. The texture, I just didn't like the feel of it, and it seemed a little rough for the markers too. I loved the stamp and the effect that it created, and I'm really excited to try more distressing products in this grungy style that I want for this book. Hope this gives you inspiration for creating something new on your pages. I appreciate you watching today. Take care and see you next time.